We light this chalice and we rejoice in our covenant of love and support, which allows us to laugh together. I don't have a chalice with me. How absurd.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome on this gorgeous day. I'm Reverend Amy Petrie Shaw. My normal pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm speaking to you from land that is the traditional territory of the indigenous Iowa people. Bill Paxson is our celebrant today, and Bruce Martin, our pianist. Barb Martin is going to be our song leader. Ann Mowry is our pastoral care associate for this week. Lyra Halston, our membership coordinator, is here with us, dressed in red there. So if you want to learn more about the church, she's going to put an email address in the chat. Please keep your mics muted during the entire service, and after the service, everyone is welcome to turn on your microphones and join us in coffee hour for our breakout rooms. And our question for today in the breakout rooms is going to be, what has made you laugh this week? What have you found absurd? I would like to open today with prayer, and it goes like this. To whom it may concern, well, we're all here again, and that's as good as it gets. Amen.
Amen.
In the words of Eric Idle, why are we here? What's life all about? Is God really real, or is there some doubt? Well, today we're going to sort it out. Today it's the meaning of life. And really what today we're going to be talking about absurdist philosophy and existentialism and Monty Python. So it's going to be fun.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. I'm Bill Paxson. My pronouns are he, him, his. No matter who you are or where you've come from, you're welcome here. Whether or not you live in Des Moines or have ever physically been at First Unitarian, no matter whoever you are, we hope that here you will find thoughts that challenge you, welcome which invite you into community, and people to accompany you as you journey. Our gathering song this morning is number 1018, Come and Go With Me, verses 1, 2, and 4. The words are copied in the chat screen. Please keep your mics muted and simply sing along at home if you'd like. Thank you. Our time for all ages today is a story that was written by Terry Jones of the Python Troupe. He's also an amazing children's author. And the story is called The Silly King. It's by Terry Jones, and it's read by our own Torin Lackman. So give me just a second.
The Silly King. King Herbert XII had ruled wisely for many years, but eventually he grew very old, and although his subjects continued to love him dearly, they all had to admit that as he had grown older, he had started to do very silly things. One day, for example, King Herbert went out of his palace and walked down the street with a dog tied to each leg. Another time, he took off all of his clothes and sat in the fountain in the principal square, singing sections of popular songs and shouting, "Radishes!" at the top of his voice. Nobody, however, liked to mention how silly their king had become. Even when he hung from the spire of the great cathedral, dressed as a parsnip and throwing Turkish dictionaries at the crowd below, no one ever had the heart to complain. In private, they would shake their heads and say, "Poor old Herbert, whatever will he do next?" But in public, everyone pretended that the king was as grave and as wise as he always had been. Now it so happened that King Herbert had a daughter, whom in a moment of slightly more silliness than usual, he had named Princess Fishy, although everyone called her Bonito. Rather conveniently, the princess had fallen in love with the son of their incredibly rich and powerful neighbor, King Rupert, and one day it was announced that King Rupert intended to pay a state visit to King Herbert to arrange the marriage. "Oh dear," said the Prime Minister, "whatever shall we do? Last time King Herbert had a visitor, he poured custard over his head and locked him in the broom cupboard." "If only there was someone who could make him act sensibly," said the Lord Chancellor. "Just while King Rupert's here at any rate." So they put up a notice offering 1,000 gold pieces to anyone who could help, and from the length and breadth of the land came doctors offering their services. But it was all no use. Not one of the doctors could make King Herbert less silly, and he just got ill from their lotions and potions and creams and powders. Eventually the day of the state visit arrived, and King Herbert was still swinging from the chandeliers in the throne room and hitting people with a haddock. Everyone was very agitated, but no one had any idea of what to do. And just then the Princess Fishy stood up and said, "Since no one else can help, let me try." "Don't talk nonsense, Bonito," said the Prime Minister. 50 of the most eminent doctors in the land have failed to cure the king. But what could you possibly do?" "I may not be able to cure the king," said the princess, "but if I could show you how to turn an egg into solid gold, then would you do as I said?" And the Lord Chancellor said, "Princess, if you could indeed show us how to turn an egg into solid gold, then we would certainly do as you told us." "For shame," said the princess. "Then you should do as I say now. I can no more turn an egg into solid gold than you can, but even if I could, it wouldn't prove that I could help my father." Well, the Lord Chancellor and the Prime Minister looked at each other, and because they had no ideas themselves, and because they had no other offers of help, they agreed to do what the princess told them. Shortly afterwards, King Rupert arrived. There were fanfares of trumpets, drums rolled, the people cheered, and they looked for King Rupert's son, but they couldn't see him. The Lord Chancellor and the Prime Minister met him at the gates of town and rode with him down the main street. Suddenly, just as they were about to enter the palace, an old woman rushed out of the crowd and threw herself in front of King Rupert's house. "Oh, King Rupert," she cried, "dreadful news! An army of 50,000 soldiers is marching through your country." King Rupert said, "Surely that cannot be." But just then, a messenger in King Rupert's own livery rode up a horse and cried, "It's true, your majesty. It's more like 1,000,000 of them. I've never seen so many." King Rupert went deadly pale and fell off his horse in a faint. They carried him into the throne room, where King Herbert was standing on his bed, balancing a box of nippers with his feet. Eventually, King Rupert regained consciousness and found his son and the princess looking down at him. "I'm afraid we are harmless now, my dear," said King Rupert to the princess. "An army of 50 million soldiers has overrun—" "I'm afraid we are homeless now, my dear," said King Rupert to the princess. "An army of 50 million soldiers has overrun our country. Do you think your father will let us stay here to live?" "Of course he will," said the princess. "Only you mustn't mind if he's a bit silly now and again." "Of course not," said King Rupert. "We're all a bit silly now and again." "That's true," said the prince. "For example, the old lady who stopped you outside of the palace was none other than the princess here, but you didn't recognize her." "Indeed I did not," said King Rupert. "And the messenger was none other than your own son," said the princess, "and you didn't even recognize him." Indeed I did not, said King Rupert. Moreover, said the princess, you didn't even stop to consider how you could defeat that army of 1,000,000 soldiers. I have no need to consider it, said King Rupert. How could I possibly deal with an army of such a size? Well, for a start, you could pour a kettle of boiling water, said the princess, for there only is an army of soldier ants. Whereupon King Rupert laughed out loud at his own silliness and agreed that the princess should marry the prince without delay. And he didn't even mind when King Herbert poured lemonade down his trousers and put ice cream all over his crown. The end.
We have two spotlights this morning. The first one is Faith in Action, and I'm going to ask Steve Gilson to unmute. He's going to talk to us for just a minute about Faith in Action.
Thank you. This morning, Faith in Action is a bridge connecting First Unitarian with the service organizations of our community. Each year, our congregation selects 2 community organizations as partners. Each selected organization has a champion from the congregation who serves as a conduit for engagement activities with the selected groups. The organizations receive half of the Sunday collections and also offer opportunities for our members to engage in activities and programs which allow for focused involvement. At our next congregation annual meeting, we will again select 2 organizations for the coming year, beginning September 2021 and ending August 2022. The Faith in Action Committee is seeking nominee organizations for the coming year. If you know of an organization you believe will be a good fit with our UU community and are willing to serve as a champion, now is the time to begin the nomination process. We have an application available on the First Unitarian website. The champion will help the organization complete the application. The applications will be reviewed by the Faith in Action Committee, and the nominees will have opportunities to communicate their programs to our UU community during the month of May. And just to let you know, the deadline for receipt of the nominations is tomorrow, April 19th. So if you know of any organization you would like us to consider, please consider being a champion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Faith in Action. So get those nominations in if you know any organization. One more quick spotlight this morning. Where'd you go, Elaine? Elaine Imlau is going to talk to us just for a minute, and go for it, Elaine.
Good morning. My name's Elaine Imlau, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And today is the day of the fabulously fun food fair fundraiser kickoff Zoom at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So all you early bird shoppers, get out there and get online. I'm going to put the website in the chat, and we'll have a couple minutes intro, and then the bidding will go live shortly after we start the Zoom. If you want to get together with a couple friends, I have some paper copies of the lists here. It's 14 pages long, so you don't have to print it out yourself if you like a paper copy. I'll put my phone number in the chat if you want to come and get one of those. And one other thing, I want to shout out to all the people from Family Promise that volunteered, because that's happening this week too. So got lots of things happening. So hope to see you at the Zoom at 4 o'clock. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Elaine. I hope to see a lot of you there. Our offering words are done today with my normal seriousness and grace. A reading from the book of Extortions, verse 37. And Saint Attila raised the offering basket on high, saying, O Lord, bless this thy basket, that with us thou mayest shake down thy people unto the last cent in thy mercy. And the Lord did grin, and the people did feast upon the lambs and the sloths and the carps and the anchovies and orangutans and breakfast cereals and fruit bats. And the Lord spake, saying, First shalt thou take out the holy baskets, then shalt thou find ushers, 3, no more, no less. 3 shall be the number thou shalt find. And the number of the finding shall be 3. 4 shalt thou not find, neither shalt thou find 2, excepting that thou then proceed to 3. 5 is right out. Once the number of ushers is 3, being the third number, then passest thou the holy baskets of First Unitarian towards thy people, who being naughty in thy sight shall cough it up. And then there was COVID-19, and the Lord spake again and said, to hell with it, we're going digital. Amen. In order that we might continue to share with one another and to laugh together, the morning offering will now be given for real and received through a link in the chat. One half of our electronic plate, as always, goes to the internal social justice programs of the church, and one half to our Faith in Action partners for this year, Planned Parenthood and Central Iowa Immigrant Coalition.
Well, the offertory music this morning, we know you're going to get Always Look on the Bright Side later on in the service, a song that was written about 60 years ago. Of course, it makes us feel, we think about the bright side in our terms of a song written 100 years ago by Jerome Kern. The same sentiment is expressed even then. Please don't be offended if I preach to you a while. Tears are out of place in eyes that were meant to smile. There's a way to make your very biggest trouble smile. Here's the simple secret of it all. Look for the silver lining whene'er a cloud appears in the blue. Remember, somewhere the sun is shining, and so the right thing to do is make it shine for you. A heart full of joy and gladness will always banish sadness and strife. So always look for that silver lining and try to find the sunny side of life. Sadness and strife. So always look for the silver lining and try to find the sunny side of life.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for all the gifts that you give to support your church. Quick reminder, please make sure if you haven't already filled out your pledge cards that you get those in just so we know where you are. It was hard putting together joys and concerns this week, because in some ways it's been a really tough week, and this is a fun service. And so when I sat down to do this, it was a challenge because we're the church all the time. We're the community that's there when it's good and when it's bad. Mary Kelly mentioned this week that our friend Pat Winter's birthday is coming up on April 21st. Please consider sending her a card with a personal note. She's still at 3801 Grand, receiving PT for that cracked bone in her arm. So it's okay to send cards to the temporary address, 3801 Grand Avenue, apartment 215. And I've got that, and I will put that address in the chat in case anybody needs that. But please consider sending a birthday card. It would be much, much appreciated. Give me 2 seconds to put that in the chat. There's that address. This week, this month, as America has started to come back in, has been challenging. I'd like to have this community hold up this week. Matthew Williams, 35, shot by the police in his own home. Dante Wright, 20, shot in his car, pulled over for having a hanging air freshener. He leaves a 2-year-old and another child on the way. Adam Toledo, 13, shot with his empty hands up like this. Over the past month, we have had the first mass shootings since lockdown. Essex, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Wilmington, Tuscaloosa, Atlanta, Cleveland, River Grove, Chicago, Indianapolis, Boulder, Memphis, Aliceville, Dallas, Yazoo City, Houston, Gresham, Stockton, and Orange. Please hold all those who have lost their lives to gun violence or to police violence over the last month in your hearts and in your prayers and in your activism. Let us share now in the chat the names of anyone we know who could use special care and attention. May the love of our community hold them all. May the light of our community shine on the broken places of the world. May the work of our community support, aid, and comfort all those who are marginalized and oppressed, silenced, and at risk, and may we never look away when we are needed. May all those who are grieving be comforted, and may you be comforted. May all those who are tired find rest, may you find rest. May the broken places be healed, may you be healed. And may all those who are filled with joy and laughter be abundant. Every week we light 3 candles together, real or virtual. One for the joys and sorrows that we've shared out loud. One for the names we've written in the chat. And one last candle for all of the joys and all of the sorrows which are deeply held, but remain unspoken here today.
Before we do our first reading, I do want you to know I got a chalice lit. Thank you very much. In keeping with the absurdism, I want you to know this is my mother's candy dish, actually. But okay, so our first reading is from Monty Python, The Meaningless of Everything by Whitney Seibold. If Monty Python has espoused any single central life philosophy, it's absurdism. Throughout even their most basic sketches going back to the flying circus days, John Cleese, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Terry Gilliam, Graham Chapman, Michael Palin, and Carol Cleveland have all playfully sought to explore the inherent meaningless in, well, just about everything. Their humor arises from the odd foibles of stuffy, modern British archetypes, newscasters, pepper pots, nerds, and chartered accountants seeking to find structure in a system that doesn't and never did make any sense. Taking pages from Camus and Kierkegaard, the Pythons look to the world and find indifference, chaos, and futility. And like anyone with a sense of humor, chose to point out how funny that could be. Reality itself, then, is Python's plaything. In the world of the Pythons, baskets of raspberries are weapons. Penguins randomly explode. And Hamlet is besieged by bogus psychiatrists. In the Holy Grail, King Arthur rides an invisible horse with his patsy clacking coconuts behind him to approximate hoof falls. This cute visual gag, necessitated by the film's low budget and subsequent lack of horses, is immediately exploded by the characters themselves when a castle dweller points out to Arthur that he has coconuts. Then he asks where coconuts could have been acquired in medieval England, and the two castle dwellers begin to theorize as how coconuts could have been imported via ambitious swallows. King Arthur rides off. The joke was taken well beyond its logical extreme, and the king became bored with his own participation. There is no floor in Holy Grail, no rules. To quote Sir Bedivere Jones, the earth is banana-shaped. We know the absurdity in the world. In some cases, that awareness takes the form of a criticism of medieval times. Bring out your dead! A criticism of English divine rights and the nobility of the Arthurian legend. You can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you. A criticism of dumb male sexual fantasies, or even a cute metatextual criticism of cinema itself. It's the old men from page 24. Even the film's opening credits have trouble getting started. The subtitles get distracted by stories of a biting moose. Nothing functions in Python's world, and not because they broke it, but because we are all cogs in something that looks like a machine, but in fact is a pile of non-moving parts, banana-shaped ones. This may be why Monty Python's movie, The Holy Grail, has endured for as long as it has, as a cult staple of teenagers everywhere. There is a rather natural need for young people and people in general to tear down all existing systems of decency and meaning to reveal the vast, apathetic universe underneath. Holy Grail taps into, politely and in a very British fashion, a wicked punk rock impulse held in the hearts of all outsiders and rebels. What Holy Grail offers, though, is not a cathartic death and destruction. There is no animosity or anger in Python. They don't wish for anarchy or chaos. Holy Grail, instead, is a weirdly intellectual essay arguing a counterpoint to mainstream society. What are you trying to deconstruct? What have you, my liege?
Our thoughts for meditation today come from a piece called Merging Absurdist and Buddhist Philosophies by Janina Mari Granada. In philosophy, the absurd refers to the conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life and the human inability to find any in a purposeless, meaningless, or chaotic and irrational universe. The author writes in Quora's Managing Absurdist and Buddhist Philosophies, the problem is in both absurdism and Buddhism is suffering. In absurdism, realization of the absurd brings suffering because humans are fundamentally driven to pursue what cannot be found. In Buddhism, attachment brings suffering because of the nature of impermanence. There's a clear point of contention here. There is nothing intrinsically human, according to Buddhism. There is no reason for want of purpose to be something necessary for humanity. Buddhism entreats us to cease attachments. Absurdity states that it's impossible because it's simply the way humans are. The absurd exists specifically because humans want meaning and fail to find it. Buddhism agrees that we will fail to find it, as what is meaningful must be eternal and nothing is eternal. It goes on to state that we must cease searching in order to end suffering. In order for the two philosophies to be reconciled, the following question must be answered. Can one attain enlightenment without violating the terms of the absurd? Please join me in 1 minute of silence, meditation, or prayer as you contemplate this idea. Our special music this morning is from the Spamalot the Musical official website. The video itself is not terribly high quality. I went back and forth with whether to show you simply the words scrolling or their actual video because it's not as high a quality as I would wish. But seeing the actors makes this video. So please excuse the quality. Again, this is the official video. So it is not as well done as I would wish.
Once in every show, there comes a song like this. It starts off soft and low and ends up with a kiss. Oh, where is the song that goes like this? Where is it? Where?
A sentimental song that casts a magic spell. They all will hum along. We'll overact like hell. Oh, this Here's the song that goes like this.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Now we can go straight into the middle eight. A bridge that is too far for me.
I'll sing it in your face while we both embrace.
And then we change the key.
Now we're in Dewey.
That's awfully high for me.
But everyone can see we should have stayed in D.
For this is our song that goes like this. I'm feeling very proud.
You're singing far too loud.
That's the way that the song goes.
You're standing on my toes.
I'm singing our song that goes like this.
I can't believe there's more.
Far too long, I'm sure.
That's the trouble with this song. It goes on and on and on.
For this is our song that is too long. You wish that you weren't born.
Let's stop this damn refrain.
Before we go insane, the song always ends like
I got to follow that. Okay. Our second reading is from How Monty Python's Terry Jones Taught Us to Laugh in the Face of Death by Mike Crisolago, written on January 22nd, 2020. It sounds crass to suggest marking the death of Monty Python alum Terry Jones by sharing a laugh, but there's a strong chance it's exactly what the Welsh comedian would have wanted. Jones, who is also a director and historian, died Tuesday at 77, 4 years after being diagnosed with a form of dementia called primary progressive aphasia. 8 years earlier, a month shy of his 70th birthday, Jones sat down with Zoomer to discuss a website of comedy sketches he created with friend Dr. Robert Buckman to entertain and inform people living with chronic medical conditions. During the interview, Jones recalled a story where Buckman had to tell a married couple that the woman had terminal cancer. And the husband leaned forward and whispered, "But doctor, what about sex?" And Rob thought for a moment and said, "Well, hadn't we better wait until your wife leaves the room?" Jones' laughter at the story served as an exclamation point on his belief in the power of humor. The idea of undercutting tragedy with comedy continued when he talked about Buckman, who died in his sleep on a plane before the website launched. He had been the life of and soul of the party, Jones told me, and it was just a big shock. I think it was a shock to him, actually. Of course, the idea of diffusing life's doom and gloom moments with humor is a Monty Python staple. Original troupe member Graham Chapman died at 48 just before the group's 20-year anniversary in 1989. And Jones reportedly quipped that his death from cancer was the worst case of party pooping in all history. Meanwhile, fellow Python and writing partner John Cleese began Chapman's funeral elegy this way: "He has ceased to be, bereft of life, he rests in peace. He has kicked the bucket, hopped the twig, bit the dust, snuffed it, breathed his last, and gone to meet the great head of light entertainment in the sky. And I guess that we're all thinking how sad it is that a man of such talent, such capability and kindness, of such intelligence should now be so suddenly spirited away at the age of only 48, before he had achieved many of the things with which he was capable, and before he had had enough fun. Well, I feel like that I should say, nonsense. Good riddance to him, the freeloading bastard. I hope he fries. There's also the 1998 live stage interview with the 5 surviving Python members who brought an urn with them that supposedly contained Chapman's ashes. At one point, the urn gets knocked over, the ashes spill everywhere, and the Python members scurry to clean it all up as the audience howls in hysterics. Following Jones's death, the BBC quoted John Cleese saying, "Of his many achievements, for me the greatest gift he gave us all was his direction of Life of Brian." Perfection. In the Monty Python classic, which Jones also co-starred, the eponymous Brian is crucified, and a man on another cross, Eric Idle, attempts to cheer him up by singing, "Always look on the bright side of life." Keep them laughing as you go. It's a sentiment that Jones embraced in life, and one that resonates now as Jones has ceased to be. Our centering song today is number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do. Please keep your mics muted and sing along at home. The words will be in the chat.
Got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing, oh Lord. Got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 You got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. When the Spirit says laugh, you got to laugh, oh Lord. And this laugh when the Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Oh, Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Laugh. Spirit, the Spirit says laugh.
And now for something completely different. 1969 was a difficult year in the United States. The Vietnam conflict was in full swing. There were riots in major cities. The civil rights movement was happening. The Stonewall riots happened. The hippies and yippies were organized. SDS seized Harvard. Sometimes it didn't seem like there was much to laugh about. And then a group of young men in England got together and realized they made each other laugh pretty hard. Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Michael Palin. Gilliam was an illustrator who'd been born in America. The rest all met at Oxford and Cambridge. And the more they talked, they realized they didn't just make each other laugh. They made everyone laugh. And so Monty Python, the comedy troupe, was born. They started with a wild sketch comedy show. If you've never seen it, please watch some episodes. Monty Python's Flying Circus. Before they were done, they had added 5 films, 19 albums, 22 books, 9 games, and 4 theatrical productions, including Spamalot, which won 3 Tonys. What made these men work so well together that 3 of them, 3 of the 6, have been voted among the world's top 50 comedians over and over and over? They used the absurd, the ridiculous, to lampoon social class structure, religious doctrine and dogma, sacred cows and sexist stereotypes and homophobia. They explored absurdist philosophy and nihilism and satire as tools of the revolution. They told people it's okay to laugh because it's okay if none of it means anything. When the Python movie, Life of Brian, came out in 1979, its working title was Jesus Christ, Lust for Glory. You can imagine how well that went over at the time. They found, though, that this kept the reporters from bothering them too much, and it was filmed as an utter satire of the Christian Testament and Christian bad behavior. All of the men distrusted organized religion, feeling it had just been shoved down their throats. They agreed that it wasn't Jesus and what he actually said that was the problem. They could find nothing there to mock. Instead, they decided to write a satirical movie that focused on the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of the followers of someone mistaken for the Messiah, who kept trying to tell people he was no such thing. British analyst Colin Marshall writes, "Before I saw Monty Python's Life of Brian, I only knew that religious people didn't like it, which intrigued me. Then I found out that some religious people liked it very much indeed, which really intrigued me." Building its story on a satirical parallel of the life of Jesus Christ, Life of Brian could never have helped drawing fire. But the Pythons knew how to use that. "So funny it was banned in Norway," read one of the film's posters. And indeed, the Norwegian government had put the kibosh on its screenings, as did Iceland's, as did a number of town councils in England. Just to make the point, so did the town I grew up in. It was not allowed to be screened there. There were protests everywhere when it showed in Cincinnati. But the quote continues, "As a satire on religion, this film might well be considered a rather slight production," writes Richard Webster in A Brief History of Blasphemy. "As blasphemy it was, even its original version, extremely mild. Yet the film was surrounded from its inception by intense anxiety in some quarters of the establishment about the offense it might cause. As a result, it gained a certificate for general release only after cuts had been made. Perhaps more importantly still, the film was shunned by the BBC and ITV, which declined to show it for fear of offending Christians." And in real life, this was amazing at the time. Hypocrisy put under a microscope. There was an infamous 1979 television debate based on this film. If you can ever get to see it, look this up. It was amazing. In one corner, we had Python's John Cleese and Michael Palin, and in the other, we had satirist Malcolm Muggeridge and the Bishop of Southwark, Mervyn Stockwood. And John Cleese was arguing that the film did not, in fact, ridicule Jesus, but instead indicts closed systems of thought of the type drilled into his consciousness during his boarding school years. Palin takes pains to underscore its nature as not a wholly religious satire, but a jab at modern English society and politics transposed onto the biblical past. And here comes the ironic part. Muggeridge and Stockwood denigrated this whole film. They denigrated its cinematic merit all the while, and they see it as a dangerous film with the potential to corrupt the youth. But then the truth comes out. They had showed up at the screening 15 or 20 minutes late. So they'd written everything they wrote thinking that Brian was in fact supposed to be Jesus. They missed the central point of the film, that Brian is not the Messiah, and proceeded to attack this witty and bright satire without any knowledge. The Python troupe spoke truth to power, and they did it in absurdist ways, which had never been done that well before. When you see Python, you don't laugh at the rugged lumberjack who announces he likes to put on women's clothing and hang out in bars. You laugh at the puzzled chorus behind him, who was merrily singing along until the song went berserk and in a direction they didn't expect. And then they continue singing along. You don't laugh at the poor man who has accidentally bought a dead parrot. You rejoice at the triumph of every man who goes to a lying shopkeeper and wins. In that sketch, the man declares triumphantly, "Look, I took the liberty of examining the parrot when I got home, and I discovered the only reason it had been sitting on its perch in the first place was that it had been nailed there. It's bleeding demised. It's not pining for the fjords. It's passed on. This parrot is no more. He ceased to be. He's expired and gone to meet his maker. He's a stiff, bereft of life. He rests in peace. If you hadn't nailed him to the perch, he'd be pushing up daisies. Its metabolic processes are now history. He's off the twig. He's kicked the bucket. He's shuffled off the mortar coil, run down the curtain, and joined the bleeding choir invisible. He's snuffed it. This is an ex-parrot." And behind all of their laughter, there is a silver lining of seriousness. Absurdist philosophers say that life and all existence happen in an inherently chaotic, irrational, meaningless, inherently purposeless universe, creating a big conflict with humanity, which looks for inherent meaning and value in life. Absurdists say that any meaning and value in life is created by us humans and isn't necessarily essential. Existentialism, which we tend to be more familiar with, emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent, determining their own development through acts of their will. And existentialists expect individual people to sculpt some sort of meaning from life and believe that this is essential, while realizing that most people will get it dead wrong. Most people are not good at this. Nihilism is the third school of thought that the Pythons play with, and it's generally more negative in direction. Broadly, it says that life definitely is meaningless, knowledge is impossible, values are baseless. For the nihilist, created or inherent meaning, worth, and value are pointless and arbitrary. Instead of facing that need to make meaning for themselves, most people deny that they have the freedom to make relevant choices. Ed Slowick says Sartre calls this denial of personal freedom or choice bad faith. So a person who believes that they are a sinner, or they believe that they are an alcoholic, that term just defines them forever. They're not free to change their actions because they've been defined. A more subtle example is when somebody takes on a role. For example, the role of a waiter, and they behave in stereotypical ways because they think in order to be a waiter, that's your only options. This is really important today when people take on the role of police officer and behave in certain ways because they believe that those ways are the definition of being a police officer. Much of Monty Python is based on these uses of rigid, stereotypical characters. The well-behaved British soldier reading cheerfully as a doctor attempts to explain to him, "You're not ill, a tiger's bitten your arm off." The overworking policeman who breaks the fourth wall and arrests all the actors for being silly. Complaining housewives, old men reminiscing about the gutters they lived in. All people who cannot think outside their roles and have lost the freedom to truly live. Python challenges us through parody to do something more with our lives than be locked into our roles. Monty Python reminds us that life is absurd. And when we step back and take a good hard look, everything is ridiculous. Everything from religion to our jobs, to the ways we've been told to live our life. They aren't laughing at the victims. They're absurdists, not nihilists. They're laughing at the people and institutions who say you have to do it one way. You have to do it right. You have to color in the lines and stay in the box. And they say, no, you don't. It's all a bunch of banana-shaped gears. Do it your way. So this summer, as you enjoy the sun, look on the bright side. Decide what it is you want out of life. Don't be afraid to say that the parrot you got handed is dead and ask for a better one. The right way is always your way, and the only thing to make fun of is mindlessly doing what you are told. Be blasphemous if you feel called to do so. Be heretical in your search for truth and meaning. Break out of your role, find out what is real for you. Refuse to accept limitations that exist only because it's always been done this way. Any side can be the bright side if you're the one holding the lamp. You've been given a quest. Go forth and find your grail. Find what is sacred to you. Find what is joyful to you. And when anything stops you from the task, step back, take a deep breath, and remember that barriers are often absurd. You have the light. Create the bright side where you will. Amen.
We extinguished the chalice and are glad that once again nothing has caught on fire here at my house. Carry a little bit of silliness into the world today.
May you always see the bright side. May you always find the laughter and center yourself in the knowledge that the world is truly absurd. Peace, ashe, and may it be so.